Hello, this is Mishnah in Depth Gittin with Miss Leora Balinsky. This is the fifth session in our series covering Gittin. This class is part of our Rifka Rosenwein Mishnah Division, sponsored by her family in her memory. This class is following the Mishnah Yomit schedule, working with a group of committed learners for covering 1 to 2 Mishnah per day. And to support people in this learning, Drisha's Mishnah Yomit program is including a weekly Mishnah Yomit shiur, which we are having right now, with the chance to review portions of the past week's material, go deep into select elements of the text, all within the context of a collaborative community. It has been a pleasure to learn with Leora for these past several weeks, and I'm happy to learn with her today. Sources will be shared on screen, and with that, I want to hand things over to you, Leora.
Okay, thank you so much. It's great to be with everyone again in the second to last meeting of this class. And the frakim that we are dealing with today, which is the seventh parak and half of the eighth parak, I think take us into a very interesting place. So what we're going to do today, I think, is a brief overview of the content of today, meaning of this past week's mishnayot, and then we're going to go specifically into the topic of a get al t'nai. And so if we just look at the mishnayot, which let's do that together. I will share my screen. So what our mishnayot deal with, and picking up from the sixth parak, is we are talking about different scenarios in terms of assessing the husband's intent in wanting or asking for a get to be written, and additionally, we then go into another topic, another related topic, which is if a person puts a conditional on a get. So if you say that this can be a get under only specific circumstances, that this will function as a get under specific circumstances. And that is what we're going to talk about today in more depth. So if we begin looking at the first Mishnah here, and we start off talking about delirium, kurdiakos, which sounds very Greek, is understood to be referring to a type of delirious illness. So a person that was afflicted. I like the word achazo because achazo is it means like to get taken hold of. Like this delirium took hold of a person, and it was apparent in their delirium that they were in their delirium when they asked for a get to be written for their wife, and we say lo amar klum. It's as if this person didn't even say anything. It's as if he didn't say anything. And essentially, the principle that we have there is that whatever you say when you're in this delirious state doesn't hold any water. As opposed to when a person becomes mute, when a person becomes unable to speak for whatever reason, in that situation, we say, okay, we can actually assess their intention and we take their intention seriously, but they just can't communicate it verbally. So it's basically two opposite cases. In the first half of the Mishnah, we have a case of a person is communicating very clearly their desires. However, we think that there's a gap between what they're communicating and what's actually going on in their mind in the sense of the actual intentions that they have. On the other hand, in the second half of the Mishnah, we have a case where someone is communicating as clearly as they can. Basically, we assume basically that what a person has in their head is clear and is actually reflecting their intention, but the means of communication is something that has to be established afresh and look, they do their best, but they don't speak. And so therefore we wait for them to we suggest, should we write a get for your wife? And if he nods his head, then we check other yes or no questions to see whether it's consistent that his nodding of his head is indicating his actual desire. And in that situation, you actually are able to write the get. So here we have a situation of trying to assess the relationship between a person's words or a person's gestures and what's going on in their head. And then I'm gonna we then have in the second Mishnah, we have a scenario in which there is a disparity between who the husband is instructing to write the get and sign the get versus what is actually happening. And so again, we're talking about like overall disparities, either in terms of the husband's intention and what's actually being done or what's actually being communicated. And now we get to the third Mishnah, which is where we begin talking about conditionals and various conditions that a person can make on the get. And we're going to return to this shortly. So I'm going to skip over it for now and also skip over the fourth Mishnah and the fifth. These conditionals and the sixth, these continue, where it's all about different conditions that you would make on a get. And so we start off with sorry, I just scrolled very quickly and I'm scrolling back up fairly quickly, but I do just want to say that we have different categories of the types of conditions that are met. So in Mishnah Gimel, actually, I will go back to it now. We talk about conditions that the husband makes about himself, in the sense of, this is your get, you will be divorced from this get if I die. Okay, that's the case that's presented there. And then in Mishnah Hey, we have a different conditional. This conditional isn't based off of the husband's actions or the husband's state in terms of whether he's alive or not. This is a get that's given on condition of the wife giving the husband money. Which puts the onus on her in a different way. And Mishnah Vav continues that of the onus being on the woman, but it's on something that's not fully in her hands. So in this case, it's about her serving her father-in-law. If she serves her father-in-law, then she will receive a get. Or if she nurses her husband's child, who may or may not be her child, then she would also receive her get. And which are two things in which the Mishnah points out, is that these are two things that aren't fully in her control, because the baby, chas v'shalom, or the father, chas v'shalom, could die. And in that situation, she's not actually able to do it. So what happens in that scenario? So what we have in the Mishnah is doing is proposing all these different conditions that the husband could make on the get, and showing that on who is the onus for each one. Is it on something that happens to the husband? Is it on something the husband does? Is it on something the wife does? Or is it on something that involves the wife and other people? In Mishnah Zion, we talk about the husband's actions in terms of whether, if he says that he will come back at a certain point after traveling within 30 days, and what happens if he does or he doesn't. And then we have that extended to 12 months if a person is traveling overseas and he says, this will be your get if I don't return in 12 months. And then we have to determine what the halacha is in that instance. And then that's how we conclude the ninth parak, is talking about someone going away for 12 months. What happens if they die in the interim and don't come back? Does the get count? Does the get not count, etc.? And one underlying principle here that I'll just share now, I suppose, although we'll return to it later, is that in get la'achar mita, you are not able to deliver a get after death. And so the question is then, how do any of these conditionals work that talk about death? And we will go back to that when we talk about the third Mishnah.
Can I ask you one question?
Yes, please, Debbie.
I was reading this through. What is the point of the get after a death, or the difference of it? The only thing I could think of is that it would have ramifications if she wants to marry a Kohen, because he can marry an almana, but he can't marry a grusha. But if the person, in other words, the marriage is over if he's dead, either way.
Yes.
So there was also this example of, if he tells two people to write a get, and then he goes up on top of a roof and he dies. What was and he had asked them to write a get and that whole thing. And I'm thinking to myself, if he's dead, he's dead. What was the point of having them write the get anyway? So I was not clear on that whole thing also.
So excellent question. One difference, and this goes to the difference that you mentioned of whether you're considered to be a grusha or an almana, is one, and that would be presumably to the woman's detriment, but one that would be to her, what's the opposite of to her benefit? There we go. I was going to say credit, but that's not right. To her benefit would be the case of if she had to do yibum or chalitza, if this was a marriage that did not result in children, and then would she have to marry her brother's brother? Nope, husband's brother. There we go. Her husband's brother, or which would be the process of yibum, or do the process of chalitza, where she has to go undergo a ritual in order to not have to marry her husband's brother. So by divorcing her with his death, however way that works, which we'll return to, what he is doing is sparing her from that process.
But would she get the same amount from the ketubah, or
I,
that, or not?
yes, I believe yes, but I think it's a question of like, do you want to put someone through this or not?
Got
Um,
Okay.
Yeah, and like having this is like it's a process that still happens in contemporary Israel, and like I'm like I mean I'm very obviously not only in Israel, but in particularly in Israel, like I know that I've heard from people who have undergone chalitza that the process can actually be like quite humiliating, unfortunately. So if we're thinking of similar, maybe there's some people who find it fine and meaningful. I've just heard, sometimes you hear the bad cases more than the okay cases. So it might be understandable why a person would want
Yeah,
to
I've heard that
undergo
too.
that even today.
Women whose husbands have died in
Yeah,
in the in the war just now, and then that chalitza is very demeaning. Yeah.
yeah, and really, yeah, painful and not necessarily what they're looking to do in that moment, to say the least. And then, yeah, hopefully, Bezrat Hashem, we will be able to make halacha something that feels meaningful to people and not demeaning, but rather empowering in some sense. Bezrat Hashem, we will have the power and the resources in order to do good by those who are serving Hashem through fulfilling the Torah. When we get to the eighth parak, we go in a little bit of a different direction, and we talk about the actual delivery of the get and how that works. And this is the first Mishnah, I'd say, is a fun Mishnah, where we're describing a situation in which a husband, throws the get into his wife, and she is either in her house or in her yard. She is considered to be divorced in that situation. Okay. So like for whatever reason, I picture like the husband being like a paper boy on a bike and you just kind of like tossing it like that as he like rides by, pedals by. That's how I always that's what the imagery that comes to my mind whenever I read this Mishnah. Which interesting is that if he throws it to her, not directly in her hands, but in her general vicinity in his house or in his courtyard, even if they are together in the same bed and he throws it at her there, then she's not divorced. And the difference here is that it's whether it is her property or his property. If it's her property, then it's considered to be an extension of her hand. And that's what Chazal understand when the pasuk says "V'natan beyada," that he should give the get in her hand. We understand that the hand, and we actually reviewed this when we looked at how the Rambam summarized everything. But that her hand doesn't mean literally her hand; it means any extension of her hand, whether that is her chatzer, whether that's her courtyard, or whether it's her shaliach, her emissary, her agent. And so when we're talking about her house in her courtyard, we're talking about property that is called nichse malog, which are properties that the woman comes into the marriage with that are not in the ketubah, and they remain hers. The husband can eat the fruits of the property, so he can benefit from the property, but they remain hers throughout the marriage and in the divorce. So in that sense, it's actually her house and her chatzer. Versus when it belongs to him, it really belongs to him, and you see that it doesn't belong to her, and therefore throwing it in her direction in his house wouldn't do anything. But if you throw it into her lap or into the basket that she has on her hen, presumably that's the kind of basket we're talking about that women would use to carry things, then that does count as being divorced, because those are considered her lap and her basket. Those are considered to be things that are strictly hers and nobody else's. And we see that, so that's we have spatially basically the spatial limits, and in terms of space and also context of how a husband can divorce his wife. In the second Mishnah, we see an interesting matter, which is that of intention, or the spoken intention, where we see that if the husband lies and deceives and is deceptive with regard to what he is giving his wife, then it does not count as a get. He actually has to tell her, this is your get. So that's interesting. On the one hand, he's able to throw it into her courtyard, but he has to be clear about what his intentions are when doing so, and he can't be deceptive. So, for example, you tell her that's something else, and then she reads it, and oh, it's a get. Or you give it to her hand while she's sleeping, and then she wakes up and reads it, and she finds that it's her get. Then that doesn't count as a get. He actually has to express it. We do see an interesting case in the end here that if you're in the public space and he throws it at her, if it's close to her, then she is divorced. If it's close to him, then she's not divorced. If it's half and half, then she is a state that is neither here nor there, which is megoreshet ve'ina megoreshet. She is both divorced and not divorced. So presumably to be divorced, she would need another get. And what this imagery immediately calls, I recall when seeing the language of megoreshet ve'ina megoreshet, is the language that we looked at 2 weeks ago when we talked about tikkun olam, where a slave who is owned by two masters and one of the masters frees him, the other one doesn't, is considered to be a chatzi eved, a chatzi ben chorin. He is considered to be half free and half a slave. He's neither here nor there. And I think that perhaps it is not coincidental that when we see all these cases here of the woman being in a state where it's dubious, it's a matter of doubt, it's not definitive in what state she's in, that there is a parallel there going on with the woman. And so we see this then in Mishnah Gimel applies to various cases. It doesn't only apply to divorce; it also applies to kiddushin, and it also applies to lending money and a person trying to give money back when we're talking about throwing things in the public square and where it lands. And the final case is also an interesting one here, where if a woman is standing on a roof and you throw the get up to her, the second that it gets to the air of the avir hagag, the air of the gag, the airspace of the roof, then it's considered that she's divorced. And if he is standing on the roof and she's below and he throws it to her, as soon as it leaves the domain of the roof, then it qualifies as divorcing her, even if it is erased in the process or even if it's burned. So we see that there is something going on in terms of like when the things are going from below to above or above to below, that as soon as it leaves a certain domain, then it is chal, then it takes root. Another important concept comes in Mishnah Dalid, which is that of a get yashan. The question is, what is a get yashan? So first, we're told that Beit Shammai say that a get yashan doesn't work, and that does work, and that Beit Hillel say it doesn't work. And then we say, oh, that did not, oh dear, okay. Sorry about that. I forget that you cannot actually click on these mishnayot when I'm in this mode. I can't highlight. Let me go back. Okay, we're just at the bottom now. That's fine. Sorry about that. Okay, we're here in Mishnah Dalid. So what is a get yashan? It's any time it's considered to be an old get and a expired get if if the man has yichud with his wife, has seclusion with his wife, in which presumably they would have been able to have relations. After the get was written, before it was delivered to her. So we're talking about this in between point, where after it was written, if he has relations with her and if he's in yichud with her, which will allow for relations, in that situation, the get becomes a old get. And according to Beit Hillel, by whom we poskin, it is forbidden to use it. It becomes null. And then in the fifth Mishnah, we have all sorts of details about the exact language that's used for the get. In terms of the specifications of exactly by what date you need to write it, and the precision that is necessary in actually writing it. And we see that if even the get is slightly imprecise and the woman uses it and then gets remarried, if the get is found to be imprecise, then she has to divorce both of her husbands. And it's like it's a very extreme and painful situation. And it's a very it basically emphasizes the importance of the precision there. So now I want to go back to the top. Sorry, I'm scrolling a lot. Everyone try not to get seasick. We're now going to return to this to the third Mishnah here, where we have the first conditional, and then let's investigate what's happening here. So as Debbie said, and as I also added on to, a takeaway from whether a woman is divorced or is considered to be an almana, or a Drisha is considered to be a divorcee or a divorcee or a widow, applies both to marrying Kohen and also in terms of doing levirate marriage, yibum, or not doing it, and undergoing the process of chalitza. So let's see what is actually entailed in the Mishnah in terms of the condition that a husband makes regarding his death. So our Mishnah says, Zegitech im mati, Zegitech im mati mecholi zeh, Zegitech lachar mita lo amar klum. So if you say, this is your get if I die, or if I die from this particular illness, or this is your get after death, he did not say anything. The reason for that being, meaning, didn't say anything, meaning this took no effect whatsoever. It's as if he didn't give a get at all. And the reason for that is because there is no get after death. As I said before, in get lachar mita, there's no such thing. It just doesn't exist in halacha. But so this is where we get tricky. Mehayom imati, me'achshav imati, harei get. So if he gives her the get, and he says, you are divorced today, if I in the future die, then that works as a get, meaning it would apply retroactively. So from the moment that the husband dies, she is retroactively divorced from the moment that he gave it to her. Mehayom ula charmita, however, so if he says from today and after death, in that situation, it's a get ve'eno get. It's both a get and it's also not a get. It's neither here nor there, because then we're in a situation in which his words are ambiguous. It's not like he's saying mehayom, but then maybe when he says ula charmita, he actually means never mind, not from today, but actually only after death, in which case it wouldn't affect anything. Or maybe he really means mehayom. And so because we're unsure of what he meant by those particular words in that situation, then it is not, it is neither here nor there. It's a get ve'eno get. And then, but in that situation, imet choletzet v'lo mitiyabem, she wouldn't be able to perform yibum. She'd have to perform chalitza, but she would still have to do it. Zekitach mahayom im mati micholi zeh. So this is your get from today. If I died from this particular illness, meaning then this is the case of a get that would go through. It's a statement that would serve as having the get go through. It would be a retroactive situation. The amad v'hilech bashuk v'chala umet, and then he gets up and goes to the market, and then so it sounds like he seems okay, right? He said micholizeh from this particular affliction, but then he gets up and goes to the market, but then v'chala v'met, then he gets sick and then he dies. Then we have a question where, okay, did he actually die from this illness, or did he die from another illness? If he died from this illness, then she's divorced. But if he died from another illness, then she's not. So omdin im machmat choli harishon met harei get ve'im lav eino get. So we then assess if she died from this first illness or from this second illness. So these are all these are the cases of the third Mishnah with regard to the husband making a t'nai with regard to explicitly to his death. And again, the takeaway here is that the halachic mechanism being used here is a retroactive application of divorce, which is really confusing to think about in terms of, okay, what is this woman's status in the interim? What can she do? What can't she do? And that's what the fourth Mishnah in Perek Zayin addresses. And so now we're going deeper into the logistics of what was discussed in the previous case of this get al t'nai. And so we say lo titiyached imo ela bifnei edim. She cannot have yichud with him. Rather, she has to be present with other witnesses. This doesn't mean that she has to, in order to have yichud with him, there has to be like azim outside that they had yichud, like we're talking about at a wedding or with a sota. Not like that. It's the opposite. It's that she can't actually have yichud with him. Rather, there have to be other people there. When we say adim, we don't mean proper adim. We say afilu eved, afilu shifcha. Okay, it can even be a slave. It can even be a maidservant. But chutz meshifchata mipnei sheli bagasba b'shifchata. It cannot be her own maidservant, because if she is in the presence of her husband with her own maidservant, there's a concern that liba gaspa means that different ways of understanding what this phrase literally means, but that either her heart is like coarse with her or gruff with her in the sense of she feels no shame around this person, or so gas can be from the word like coarse or rough, and then it also gets to like crass and shame, or it could be gas from the language of like gisa, which means like side. So her heart has a side with her, meaning she's very comfortable around her. And so when you are with someone who you're really comfortable around, you will be uninhibited. And the idea here basically is that you need to have other people around so that the husband and wife don't have relations. And so any person, the Mishnah tells us, serves as basically a buffer against that, except for her own maidservant, who presumably she will feel uninhibited around. So once we declare that, then we ask, wait a second, Mahi Botan Hayamim, what is she during this? What is happening? Who is she? What is her status? What's going on? And here we have a machloket. Rabbi Yehuda says she's a ke'eshet ish l'chol dvareha. She is fully still considered to be married in this moment. Rabbi Yossi Omer megoreshet ve'ina megoreshet. Rabbi Yossi says that she is neither here nor there. That she is both divorced and not divorced. If you look at Rabbi Yehuda's rationale, the idea here is that the get doesn't actually take effect until she dies. And so we're talking about the period of time till he dies, sorry. So we're talking about the period of time before he dies, and therefore she's a married woman. If we look at Rabbi Yossi's reasoning, or Rabbi Yossi's reason, where he says Megoreshet beina Megoreshet, there's different ways of understanding what his reasoning is. According to Rashi, the understanding is that basically every single moment that she is still married, it's a suffix as to whether that is the moment that it is immediately preceding her husband's death, because you never know when he's going to die. And if that's the case, then every single moment could potentially be when she is going to be Megoreshet. So therefore, she's always in a sense of, on the one hand, not divorced, but on the other hand, could be potentially divorced at any single moment. So that is her status. And according to Tosfot, it's a different type of suffix that Rabbi Yossi has, where his suffix is that the intention of the husband is actually unclear, in the sense that, did he mean that the get should take effect immediately so that she is like a single woman again, or should it be that it just takes place, that it just takes effect immediately before his death, and so she's like an ishet ish, a married woman up until that point. So we have a machloket regarding what this actually means, and we're going to return to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion when we get into a Tosfot. Ooh, a Tosfot. So with that, I now want to take us to the case in Tanakh that Chazal understand to be one of a get al Tanai. Does anyone know what I'm referencing?
King
David,
Batsheva Uriah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we're just gonna get into that a little bit because I think it's fun, especially in the context of this Mishnah, to also see how we read this context. We read this case into a case of Tanakh, and actually, there are those who argue that it goes back even farther than that. So let's first just refresh ourselves with the story. Do I want to? I put in a lot of psukim. I took some away, but there are still a lot. I should also put an ellipsis here after Yudchet because that's where I skipped around. Okay. ... There we go. Okay, so let's just, we're going to summarize a little bit. Okay. I kind of want us to actually read and actually see the psukim inside. Okay, I think I want to read. Would anyone like to read the Hebrew, and would anyone like to read the English? Okay, we got Nathan and we got Sigal. Okay, those are the hands that I see. Sigal, Ivrit,
עברית
and in
כמובן.
English, is that okay?
עברית זה טוב.
Okay, מעולה. Okay. So Sigal, start us off, and then if you could translate pasuk by pasuk, that'd be great.
אוקיי. ויהי לי תשובת השנה לעת צאת המלאכים, וישלח דוד את יואב ואת עבדיו עמו ואת כל ישראל, וישחיתו את בני עמון, ויצורו על רבה, ודוד יושב בירושלים.
At the turn of the year, the season when kings go out to battle, David sent Yoav with his officers and all Israel with him. They devastated Ammon and besieged Rabbah. David remained in Jerusalem.
ויהי לעת הערב, ויקם דוד מעל משכבו, ויתהלך על גג בית המלך. וירא אישה רוחצת מעל הגג, והאישה טובת מראה מאוד.
Late one afternoon, David rose from his couch and strolled on the roof of the royal palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful.
וישלח דוד, וידרוש לאישה, ויאמר, הלא זאת בת שבע, בת אליעם, אשת אוריה החיתי.
The king sent someone to make inquiries about the woman. He reported, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite.
וישלח דוד מלאכים, ויקחיה, ותבוא אליו, וישכב עמה, והיא מתקדשת מטומאתה, ותשב אל ביתה.
David sent messengers to fetch her. She came to him, and he lay with her. She had just been purified after her period, and she went back home.
ותהר האישה, ותשלח, ותגד לדוד, ותאמר, הרע אנוכי.
The woman conceived, and she sent word to David, I am pregnant.
וישלח דוד אל יואב, שלח אליי את אוריה החיתי, וישלח יואב את אוריה אל דוד.
Whereupon David sent a message to Yoav, send Uriah the Hittite to me, and Yoav sent Uriah to David.
ויבוא אוריה אליו, וישאל דוד לשלום יואב.
When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Yoav and the troops were faring and how the war was going.
ויאמר דוד לאוריה, רד לביתך ורחץ רגליך, ויצא אוריה מבית המלך, ותצא אחריו מוסת המלך.
David said to Uriah, go down to your house and bathe your feet. When Uriah left the royal palace, a present from the king followed him.
וישכב אוריה פתח בית המלך את כל עבדי אדוניו, ולא ירד אל ביתו.
But Uriah slept at the entrance of the royal palace, along with the other officers of his lord, and did not go down to his house.
ויגידו
Okay,
לדוד...
Sigal, I'm actually going to stop you for a second. I think we're gonna skip a little bit of this part, which is the altercation between David and Uriah, depending on how we read that, and we'll return to that in Gemara. And let's just skip down to Pasuk Tedba. Sorry, so sorry. Let's continue where we left off with Pasuk Tedvav. So yeah, I said to skip down. I don't know which part got cut out. But let's continue with Pasuk Tedvav. We'll skip down.
אוקיי, ויכתוב בספר לאמור, הבו את אוריה אל מול פני המלחמה החזקה, ושבתם מאחריו, וניקה ומת.
He wrote in the letter as follows, place Uriah in the front line where the fighting is fiercest, then fall back so that he may be killed.
I think we see so far, just like reading this text inside, for those who are familiar with the story of David and Bathsheba and have encountered it inside before, and for those who have only heard about it, for those who aren't super familiar, I think just when you read it inside, it's very stark, I would say, what is really happening. And then it's interesting to see how Chazal see it in their eyes in terms of, and also the machlokot that exist within Chazal, the disagreements that exist within the rabbis in terms of what was David actually doing here. And that's what we're going to get into in terms of the Get Al T'nai once it is back, once we're back and rolling.
I have the source sheets. Let me know just let me know what Mishnah I should pull up.
Within the psukim of David and Bathsheba in Shmuel Bet Yud Aleph. Okay.
Okay, I think this is where we saw.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm back to Ted Zion. So
Yes. ויהי בשמור יואב אל העיר, ויתן את אוריה אל המקום אשר ידע, כי אנשי חיל שם.
So when Yoav was besieging the city, he stationed Uriah at that point where he knew that there were able warriors.
ויצאו אנשי העיר, וילחמו את יואב. ויפול מן העם מעבדי דוד, וימת גם אוריה החיתי.
The men of the city sallied out and attacked Yoav, and some of David's officers among the troops fell. Uriah the Hittite was among those who died.
וישלח יואב, ויגד לדוד את כל דברי המלחמה.
Yoav sent a full report of the battle to David.
Oh, and whoops, ignore the little excerpt of the previous pasuk there and start from Kafav. Sorry about that.
all right.
ותשמע אשת אוריה, כי מת אוריה אישה, ותספוד על בעלה.
When Uriah's wife heard that her husband Uriah was dead, she lamented over her husband.
ויעבור האבל, וישלח דוד, ויאספה אל ביתו, ותהי לו לאישה, ותלד לו בן, וירא הדבר אשר דוד עשה בעיני השם.
After the period of mourning was over, David sent and had her brought into his palace. She became his wife, and she bore him a son, but the matter was bad in the eyes of Hashem. Yeah. The
Yeah.
matter was Lois was speaking of what David had done. Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much to our readers who dealt with quite their trials and tribulations in that process of getting through the sukkim. So thank you very much. And so we see here this ends on like it ends on a very, very intense, serious note that seems presumably unambiguous with regard to the moral valence of David's actions. And we continue immediately with Hashem sending Natan to then go chastise David through a mashal, through a parable that is fairly unclear with regard to an ewe, a female sheep. And a rich man and a poor man and the parable generally we have a mashal and then we have the nimshal. It's not super clear what the mashal and the nimshal is there. But then once he gets through it, then we have the next pasuk, which seems to be a clear a very, very clear expression, seemingly when you read it in the pshat of what David had done wrong, in the which is the next source on the page. Kayla, if you can share again, or if I should try sharing again, what do you think?
I got it.
Okay, thank you so much. Where he says, "Madua bazita et dvar Hashem lasot hara בעיניי את אוריה אחי הכית בחרב ואת אשתו לקחת לכל אישה ואותו הרגת בחרב בני עמון." Why then have you flouted the command of the Lord and done what displeases him? You put Uriah the Hittite to the sword. You took his wife and made her your wife and had him killed by the sword of the Ammonites. So it sounds like Hashem, like he has flouted the word of Hashem through all of these things, through putting Uriah to the sword, through taking his wife and making him her wife, and through having him killed, which is essentially the same as the first, right? But it sounds like every element of this is something bad. So now let's get into Masechet Shabbat. Where the discussion is about whether David has ever sinned or not. And we see Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, in the name of Rabbi Yonatan, makes the case that he did not sin with Bathsheba. So Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says, Rabbi Yonatan said, Kol ha'omer David chata, eino ela toeh. Anyone who says that David sinned is mistaken. Shneimar v'hi David l'chol drachav, maskil v'Hashem imo v'gomer. Where it says that David, Hashem was with David. Efshar chet ba'al yado u'shchina imo. Could it possibly be that someone is a sinner and Hashem is still with him, that the shchina, the divine presence of God is still with him? Presumably we're supposed to say no, although I'd love if the answer was yes, but presumably the answer the Gemara is looking for is no, that's not a possibility. Ella, ma ani mekayem madua bezita dvar Hashem la'asot hara, shebikesh la'asot v'lo asa. So now what we're going to do is understand this pasuk above, which seems like a clear rebuke of David HaMelech for what he did, for what he sinned, and we're going to say no, it's actually not what we think. Where it says, why'd you flouted the command of Hashem? Really, it's that we're paying attention to the word la'asot here, and what we're saying is that he only wanted to flout the words of Hashem. He had a desire to, but he didn't actually do it. So that David actually didn't do things in a way that was improper.
Sorry, just for Rachel, the citation is Shabbat 56a.
Yeah. We're also, scroll down a bit. Perfect. Thank you, Kayla. It's hard with the screen so little there. I feel bad because I'm also looking at my screen independently just because, so sorry if I'm going I hope I'm going at an okay pace. I'll also make sure now that I can see all the screens. Okay, great. This will be better. So now we have we continue with a further understanding, with a further defense of David, where Amar Rav, if you scroll down, Kayla, thank you so much. To
okay.
the
Amar of Shmuel bar Nachmani, Rabbi Amar.
No, so keep going.
Okay.
Keep going at the next, yeah. Yeah, there
Okay,
we
the
go.
next
Thank you so
number.
much.
Okay, the next number. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Amarav, Rebbe, da'ati mi David, mahafeich v'darish b'skute de David. So we see that Rav says that Rabbi Yehuda Natzi, who was a descendant of David HaMelech, Dafka wanted to see things in the light, in a sympathetic light of David HaMelech, what he did. And so now we're going to have an understanding. Madua bazita dvar Hashem, what the quote, why did you flout the words of Hashem? Rabbi Omer, Mishna ra'azo mikol rosh haBatorah, shekol rosh haBatorah k'tiv bahu bayas, v'chan k'tiv v'la'asot. So in all the bad things that people do in the Torah, it says that they did it. Here it just has the shem poel form of la'asot. Should be kesh la'asot v'lo asa. So continuation of what we saw earlier, that he wanted to do something bad, but he didn't fully actually do it in a bad way. At Uriah Chiti Chikita Bacherev, when the pasuk says that you smote Uriah Chiti with your sword, we actually see that this means something else. Shayalach ala duno Sanhedrin velo danta, that you actually should have brought Uriah Chiti to the Sanhedrin to be judged there, and you didn't do that. What? Okay. Vetishto lakachta lecha leisha lekuchin yesh lecha ba. That his wife you taken to be your wife, it means that you actually have likuchin with her, meaning you have the right to marry her. If Kayla, if you could scroll down a little bit now, also sorry, because I just went farther than. Thank you so much.
Keep going,
Okay.
or
So now you can scroll down till the next till we get to Da'amar Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani.
got
Thank
it?
you so much. Okay. As Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, Amar Rabbi Yonatan, Kol hayotzel milchamet Beit David, kotev get kritu leishto. Anyone who went out in the war of Beit David, they would write a get kritu. They would write a bill of divorce to their wife. Shnamar ve'et aseret charitzei ha'chalav ha'ela tavi l'sar ha'alef ve'et achicha tivkod l'shalom ve'et urbatam tikach. Sorry, arubatam tikach. So it says with regard to Shaul and the Plishtim that in that context, in the context of that war, that their pledge, that you should bring your brother's greetings and take their pledge. So now we ask, what does Aruba Tam mean? What does their pledge mean? Tane Rav Yosef. If you could scroll down another little bit, Kayla, thank you. Sorry, a little up. Sorry. Perfect. Sorry, slightly down. Yeah, it's just for those last two lines. Tani Rav Yosef Dorim ha'me'oravin beino levaina. The things that are mixed up between them, that are shared between them. That's how we understand arubatam, is the matters that are mixed up between them. And so therefore we read it as, okay, you should not take their you shouldn't take their pledge, but rather take the bill of divorce that would determine their status. So we read into the text as saying that this actually happened earlier also. And now we continue to say that when the pasuk says that you killed him with the sword of Bnei Ammon, we don't see it as you have actually killed him and you're liable for it, but rather just as this sword that was used for Bnei Ammon that you're not punished for, so too Uriah Chiti you will not be punished. Okay. Now we are going to just scroll down until that's basically, I think that's enough of this Gemara, where we see again a clear defense of David, of David HaMelech's actions that come out. And what's interesting is that the very what's interesting is at the very end, actually. So sorry, Caleb, if you could get to exactly that statement of Amar Rav that is on the screen right now. If we could just focus on that.
Yes.
Thank you so much. That Rav says that he actually, while he didn't sin with Bathsheba, there was no hate there. What he did with Uriah was actually not okay. So that's just an interesting note. But now we're about to have our Mishnah in our Mishnah Daled with regard to the machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi with regard to what is actually this woman's status when, after she has been given a get al t'nai, what is happening with her. We're going to see that come up now at the Tosfot. And so I'm sorry, I don't have this Tosfot translated. It's the next source, but I'll translate as I read. So Tosfot Masachet Shabbat, get kritut kotev leishto. So we're talking about the notion that everyone would write a bill of divorce to their wives. Pirush Rashi al Tnai. So Rashi explains that this get that was written was specifically the get al Tnai that we were referring to in our mishnayot in Gittin. It's a conditional get that, again, if it ends up happening that the husband dies, then it would retroactively divorce her from the moment that the get was Gittin. Pirush Rashi al Tnai she'im yamut b'milchama tehei megoreshet me'achshav. So Rashi explains that if he were to die in war, then the wife would be divorced from achshav, meaning from the time that the get was given. Okay, and therefore, if that's the case, if that's the get al t'nai in that situation, then David did not sleep with a married woman because she was divorced retroactively from the moment that that he died, going backwards from the moment that it was actually given to her. Okay. But from the moment that Uriah gave her the get. Okay. And Kayla, if you could scroll down a tiny bit for the Tzarich Lomar. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, got it.
So now we say, okay, we're going to explain this a little bit. V'tzarich lomar leperusho. So we have to say, in order to sort of to understand Rashi fully, da'afagav de'Uriah ba min hamilchama. So we say that even though Uriah actually did come back, because he came back first before he was ultimately killed, the condition must have been that if he doesn't come, the get must have been given not on the condition of I will never return to you again, but rather if I don't return to you at the end of the war, then this will be a get. So now we're explaining how Rashi could understand this as a get al t'nai in the context of the get al t'nai that we saw in our Mishnayot. But now Tosfot has an issue. Okay, so if you could also scroll down until so that kasha is at the top of the screen.
Got it.
Thank you so much. Okay, kasha ditznan v'misha achzu in the Gemara that discusses our Mishnayot. Mahi beotan hayamim. What is she considered in those days where after the get has been given to her, but before the condition has kicked in and made her retroactively divorced? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, harehi ke'eshet ish l'chol dvareha. V'im kain l'Rabbi Yehuda hayta eshet ish gemura. If you could scroll down a little now too. Thank you to the Venera. So if that's the case, and meaning we have a machloket Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, regardless of who we paskin by, we have a problem here because Rabbi Yehuda had the opinion that you would be an Eshet Ish for all matters. And if it's the case that you would be an Eshet Ish for all matters, that means that at least according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, David HaMelech, when David HaMelech had relations with Bathsheba, when he was actually doing that, it was fully as an Eshet Ish, and that it was full adultery, and that contradicts our Gemara. And our explanation of what David HaMelech was actually doing. So how, even if it was a get al t'nai, basically, that means it's not enough. That's not sufficient. Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, she's considered to be a full Eshet Ish. So how are we going to resolve this? We're going to resolve it. Rabbi Tam is going to take us in a different direction. You already pulled it up. Thank you. Venir Rabbeinu Tam. So according to Rabbeinu Tam, oh, you were perfect where it was. Sorry. Thank you so much. Shahaya megarsha legamre below shum t'nai. So no, it wasn't actually a get al t'nai because a get al t'nai, it's possible that she still considers to be an Eshet Ish in the interim. So it couldn't have been that, but rather it was a full divorce. And so at this point we say, okay, it was a full divorce for all matters. And therefore, David didn't sin at all because it was just a full divorce, full stop. Before he went out to war, Uriah gave Bathsheba a get. It had no conditions. It was just a get now. And then presumably, if he were to come back from war, then he'd be able to marry her again, assuming that she had not married anyone else in the interim. But if not, then she'd be free, not an aguna, not a chained woman, just able to continue on with her life. But now we say we have a problem. We have a problem, which is that Veha de Amrinan behazahav in Bav Metzia mutav shiv'ol adam safeg eshet ish v'lo yalbin epnei chavero barabim. And so we have a statement that it is preferable for a person to have relations with someone who is a safek eshet ish, someone who is in the category of maybe an eshet ish, maybe a married woman, maybe not a married woman, rather than embarrassing a person in public. And so this is in the context of a statement of how bad it is that we're understanding it's a part of a longer discussion where we take a pasuk into Tehillim and understand that David HaMelech is addressing the situation of being shamed for his actions, and where we're saying that the Gemara is saying that it's actually really, really bad to harm someone in public. It's even worse than being with someone who's a safek eshet ish. The problem, though, is that once we call someone a safek eshet ish, we're calling Batsheva a safek eshet ish. And that means that it couldn't be that she was fully divorced. That means that it actually sounds like it was some sort of get al tanai, where she wasn't fully divorced. She was safek megurashet, safek ina megurashet. She was somewhere in the middle, which means that what David did, again, we're back into problematic, sinful territory. So what do we do with that? It sounds like it really wasn't a full divorce. Is the question clear? Should I repeat it? I can't see everyone's faces. Let me try to see people's faces.
Here, let me stop the share for a second so you can see.
Okay, great.
Faces.
Should I repeat the question, the challenge? Are we clear on the challenge? We're okay? Okay, great. So what do we do? What do we do then? Caleb, if you could then share the final part.
Absolutely. One moment.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for your patience. Because I keep on expecting you to read my mind, which is not how things work. But you are coming very close, so I'm very grateful. And we say Minel and David, we say that this is learned from the case of David HaMelech. So we say, Karila safek eshet ish lafisha yum garshin betsina v'ha'olam surim shehi eshet ish. So it's not that she was actually a safek eshet ish. It's not that she was actually, it was a matter of doubt whether she was a married woman or not. But rather, the divorce that happened, that Uriah divorced her with, that whole process happened in private. And so the world didn't know that she was a divorcee. And therefore, that's in the sense that it is a dubious matter because it wasn't something that was widely broadcasted. It's not that her status was actually in doubt. It was that in the eyes of the world, she still seems like an Eshet Ish. And so that's how Tosfot wraps up everything together. So just to summarize the Tosfot brings in Rashi, who says that what Uriah gave to Bathsheba was a get al tanai, that he would die die in the sense of not come back at the end of the war, and that's how we understand Rashi. And Tosfot have the problem of, if that's the case, then that doesn't work with Rabbi Yehuda in Perek Zayin of Masachet Gittin Mishnah Daled, where he says that when you're in that interim period after the get is given, you're actually still considered to be a married woman for all matters, in which case what David did was a full-on act of adultery. So then, according to Tosfot, we can't understand it to be a get al tanai. We actually have to understand it as full divorce. So I think this is just a very interesting way of, in general, it's one of my favorite things that happens in the Gemara, and it happens in the Medrash, and it just happens in text from Chazal, is understanding the figures in the Mikra, the figures in Tanakh, through the lens of the halachic discussions that they were having. And I think this is a very interesting instance. And I think it's also just important to note that this discussion of get al t'nai, or just of giving a get full stop before going off to war, is something that has practical implications in our time as well. I also just want to note that the Baal HaTurim on Parshat Bamidbar, Yaakov ben Asher, actually says that it goes back even farther, that actually Moshe Rabbeinu also had this practice. So like there's this to send everyone out to war, when the men were going out to war, to send them with a get, which he proves from Exera Sheva, from when the same word applies in different scenarios, to try to understand from one to the other. So in like the rabbinic imagination, this is something that is going all the way back in the rabbinic imagination / reality. I'm not making claims about what happened, but we see that there's like a vested interest in seeing this as being something that was effective going back. And then if we jump all the way forward in history, the Rabbanit in Eretz Yisrael in World War II said that Jewish men should sign a get al t'nai before they go to the front lines to fight. In fact, there was a situation that happened where Rav Herzog, who was in Eretz Yisrael, instructed Professor Louis Yitzchak Rabinowitz, Rabbi Professor Louis Yitzchak Rabinowitz, who was serving as the rabbi with the British in the Middle East, to have a group of soldiers who are about to go on a dangerous mission, to have them actually sign a get al t'nai before going out on that mission. And it ended up happening that they were at sea, and 140 out of 462 soldiers died when their ship overturned. when it came to the state of Israel, there was a suggestion of bringing back this practice that happened in the army of David HaMelech, that every married combat soldier should sign a get al t'nai, and it would only be used in a situation where the soldier was missing and would leave his wife as an aguna. And so it would be something that would be signed and only used in that specific scenario where there was a doubt. Interestingly, Rav Shlomo Goren poskined against this, partially because of concern of a forced get, a get musa, which will come up in next week's batch of mishnayot, also the final batch, but mostly because of concerns about affecting the morale of the soldiers. Also, Kayla, you can stop the share screen if you so desire.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
just going to stop so people can ask questions and in the last few minutes of class, and we can see each other's faces during this part.
Perfect. Thank you so much. His greater concern was that it would affect the morale of the soldiers if every single soldier signed something saying that they're basically divorcing their wives if they die. That would bring up each soldier the possibility of them actually dying in war, and therefore it's something to not be encouraged because it would adversely affect the fighting. Rav Yaakov Ariel in 2008 said we should actually bring back a get al t'nai for combat soldiers. If we get to contemporary Israel, unfortunately, there has been a lot of discussion about get al t'nai since October 7th, and some people want to bring back the get al t'nai. Some people might even be doing it privately. But what is a different solution is actually one that Rav Goren also proposed. That is also something that the Center for Women's Justice in Israel sends out, which is it's what's called a harsha'a leget. It's an allowance for a get that allows for another person to write a get for you under certain circumstances. So it's not that the get is written al t'nai already, but rather it's that there's permission to write a get in a certain scenario. The Center for Women's Justice calls it a shtar bitachon, a bill of safety, a bill of safety. And Rav Yoni Rosenzweig, who I don't know if people are familiar with him, but he does amazing work, tremendous Talmud Chacham. Yes, all the thumbs up with regard to mental health and halacha, as well as many other areas. But that's perhaps maybe what he's most famous for. So he wrote an extensive response on the subject. And even though it's not something that is lechatchila accepted by many batei din, a lot of people will now sign this shtar bitachon, and the idea is that it'll end up being accepted even after the fact, even by batei din who wouldn't necessarily accept it lechatchila, and it just shows like a tremendous amount of care that partners have for each other, and that for a lot of partners, it's actually the opposite of lowering morale to do this. It's really a sign of extra love, which is kind of similar to, or perhaps analogous to the halachic prenup that is signed in order to create a situation where the woman will not be refused a get by her husband, or the woman will not refuse to accept the get from her husband, which, since the Takana Rabbeinu Gershom, that women actually have to actively accept their gerushin. You can no longer just throw it into their yards, as our Mishnah depicts. You actually have to actively accept it now, is a relevant reality again, where people who sign it are not signing it out of a belief in the insecurity of their marriage, but rather because out of a devotion to their spouse and out of an increased sense of security, in the sense of they want the best for their partner. And that's also what happens when people in Israel nowadays sign the shtar bitachon. So we went from our Mishnah to Tanakh, to Chazal, to Tanakh, back to the present. And I just think it's a fascinating adventure to see how these ideas and concepts evolve, and how they are applied, not necessarily how they evolve, but how they're applied differently based on different realities and the different considerations that come into play in making these theoretical concepts a halachic reality once again. So thank you, everybody. Sorry, I went a few minutes over due to the technical difficulties on my end. And thank you so much for your patience. Thank you to the readers. And yeah, I'll see everyone next week, Bezrat Hashem, for the final class, where I think we're going to spend a lot of time finally talking about the actual legitimate reasons for giving a get on Beit Hillel versus Beit Shammai on that. And also huge thank you to Kayla for putting up my source sheet and being so graceful with figuring out how to do that and navigating that and all the scrolling and reading my mind with that. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And I just want to remind people that even though next week is our last class with Ms. Balinsky, that Mishnah in Depth will continue with the next Masachet with the next book, which is Kiddushin, and that will be starting Sunday, July 21st at the same time with Dr. Hanan Gafni, and you can sign up at drisha.org/classes. Chodesh Tov for those who are in the Western Hemisphere, and
Thank
have
you.
a good day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.